And so Egyptian hieroglyphics arose around 3000 BC, and they began to write. And they wrote in different ways. They wrote by cutting into stone. That's where we have the real pictures. And then by writing on paper with pen and ink. But you see, the Egyptians had papyrus. That is, they made paper. They made papyrus. And they wrote in pen and ink. And the symbols that they wrote in pen and ink are the hieroglyphic symbols, but they become more cursive. In other words, as you write, you change things a little bit. And so we call it hieratic, but it's really hieroglyphic in written form. And this served them for the next 3,000 years. Now, what's interesting about the cuneiform system of writing, which is the Sumerian system modified into Babylonian, modified into Sumerian, and then into Persian and Hurrian and Armenian and so on. This system of writing, the Babylonian system of cuneiform writing, was used for 3,000 years, from the invention of writing and down to just about the beginning of the Christian era. The hieroglyphic system in Egypt was used for 3,000 years, from its beginning until the coming of the Greeks under Alexander the Great. Which means that for the whole period of the historical period, the whole 5,000 years of the historical period, 60% of that period, writing was always in either Babylonian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphic. The Phoenician, Canaanite, Hebrew alphabet was created by the Canaanites, Phoenicians, sometime around 1800 BC. We have their writings from 1500 BC, and not only that, not only did they create an alphabet, namely a system of 30 letters, 30 symbols, which could write any language. We even have tablets in which they actually were teaching people how to write it, and the tablets have exactly the same form, namely the same order as we have, namely A, Ba, Ga, Da, and so on. The order of the Hebrew alphabet, which is essentially the same. All alphabets, by the way, all alphabets derive from the Phoenician, Canaanite, Hebrew alphabet. All. Now, what happened if they invented something which is so economical and so efficient, and you only need 30 letters to say, hey, why didn't the world adopt it? The answer is, don't you know the answer? Tradition. Not only that tradition, but ingrained resistance. Look, a good Sumerian, a Babylonian scribe, these people started school at the age of 5. And they were sent to school. You can have your lunch, but you're there 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and you're learning how to perfect this system. And you grow up, and then you become a specialist in the age of 15, 16, or 18. You become a scribe for the courts, and you write legal documents, or you become a scribe for the temples, and you're writing astronomical or mathematical documents. Your life is embedded in these strokes. Someone's going to come and tell you, hey, we got another system? Thank you. The same thing happened to the Egyptians. I mean, the Egyptians were scribes who were trained from childhood, and they became not only expert, and by the way, there's a difference between our system of writing. I was just telling my daughter that the owners of our apartment house put up a notice on every door that they're going to paint the halls. And I look at it and I said, you don't have to know how to read and write to be rich. I mean, in a simple document, there's so many spelling errors. Interesting. Well, our approach to writing is different. They were so proud of it. There's a document which Professor Kramer published in which these schoolboys are competing. And one of them says, I can write as fast as you can speak. Now, what we do know is perhaps they didn't write stenographically, but they developed a system. So, for example, the court records, when we have a record of a trial in court, they evidently recorded the essence of every statement. They didn't miss a thing. They wrote efficiently and rapidly, and they were very proud of that. And of course, only the scribes knew how to read and write. Very few people did. Now, one Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal, claimed with pride that he knew how to read and write. But we know of one pharaoh of Egypt who was a scribe, and eventually, through a lot of interesting intrigues, became pharaoh. And he was very proud of the fact that he was once a scribe. So his statues are not just seated on a throne. He has a statue where he's sitting, with his legs crossed and a scroll spread over his knees, and he's writing with a pen. But writing was a rare art, and it was the art of the professionals. And you can see why you had to be a professional. And you have to learn so many symbols and such a technique. And this would also explain their resistance to the alphabet. There's something else which is interesting. In the Egyptian system of writing, you have a syllabary, that is several hundred symbols which represent syllables. You have a whole list of determinatives which tell you in advance what's coming. You have also, and this is what's strange, an alphabet in Egyptian hieroglyphic of 22 signs which are just symbols of consonants and can be used to write the whole language. This alphabet is embedded in the hieroglyphic system. So you could say, they had an alphabet. Why didn't they use it instead of the rest? Oh no, not in Egypt. In Egypt, you saved everything. You preserved everything. You have the alphabet, that's nice. We'll use it together with the syllables and the determinatives. So in Egyptian writing, in many cases, they will write something. They'll put in a symbol, which is a picture, which means what's coming next is a cow. All right? That's the determinative. Then they will put in the symbol, which is ka. Then they'll put in another symbol, which is a, and another one, which is ow. So you have then the determinative and the three symbols indicating this word is cow. And by the way, the word for cow in ancient Egyptian was cow. So giving you exactly what was there. But they will give all of the elements. In other words, reading Egyptian hieroglyphics is very easy. Writing is a different story. To write, you have to write a lot. But once you begin to read, it's so easy to read because everything is there. The determinative, which tells you what's coming, the syllables, and also the alphabetic elements, if they want to use them. So again, it's tradition which really kept and preserved these ancient systems for 3,000 years. It was only the coming of Alexander the Great and this tremendous influx of Greek civilization, which disturbed everything. And in Egypt, they began to use the Greek alphabet to write the Egyptian language, and they used it for centuries. They wrote the Egyptian language in the Greek alphabet with certain variations down to about 600-700 years ago. And in Babylonia, they began to use the Hebrew alphabet. In the Aramaic and Hebrew used the same alphabet. The Aramaic language penetrated the whole region. People began to use the Aramaic symbols, and the alphabet then became the standard in Babylonia, although in the courts of Babylonia they still used Babylonian cuneiform down to about the year 100. Babylon, because remember, in courts, you keep certain traditions and certain ancient forms. And there were Babylonian tablets that were still being used down into the period of about 100 BC, and somehow a little later. But already the language had changed, and the Aramaic language began to replace the Babylonian language, and then, of course, the alphabet predominated.